This is East Asia Tonight.
Good evening, I'm Jill Newbrunner, and here are tonight's top stories from East Asia. China takes aim at the Quad, calling the security alliance between Australia, India, Japan and the US detrimental to regional trust. Italy's Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni in China to repair strained bilateral relations. They're holding talks with Chinese President Xi Jinping. Thousands in North Korea forced to flee their flood-hit homes as record-breaking rain inundates areas along parts of its border with China. And the race to make advanced chips heats up. Japan is getting ready for an exceptional bill to help a state-backed chip maker secure funding. And ahead on East Asia tonight, the Philippines Senate following a ban on the country's Chinese-dominated offshore gaming sector. It resumes hearings on related crimes, including a curious case involving a suspended mayor whom authorities allege to be a Chinese national. We speak to our correspondent for details. China has hit out at the Quad grouping comprising the US, India, Japan and Australia, describing its actions as detrimental to the mutual trust and cooperation of regional countries. Now, this after the bloc highlighted security in the Indo-Pacific, including that of the South China Sea, as one of its key concerns.
美日印澳四边机制，嘴上唱着构建自由开放的印太的高调。 干的却是人为制造紧张、煽动对立对抗、遏制他国发展的事，与求和平、谋发展、促合作、图繁荣的亚太的大事背道而驰，注定不得人心。
Earlier, foreign ministers of the group held talks in Tokyo amid China's growing assertiveness, with US Secretary of State Antony Blinken reaffirming Washington's commitment to the region.
This is a moment of unprecedented strategic alignment among our four countries. We have four countries that are united by a shared vision for a free and open, connected, a secure, a prosperous, resilient Indo-Pacific region. That means, simply put, that problems are dealt with openly, rules are reached transparently, applied fairly, that goods, that ideas, that people will flow freely and lawfully across land, across cyberspace, the open seas.
India's Foreign Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar and Australian counterpart Penny Wong also echoing Mr. Blinken's sentiments, reaffirming the Quad's shared goal of developing prosperity for the region.
There is a strong interactive dynamic between the Quad and our respective bilateral and even trilateral relationships. Progress on one front strengthens the other and thereby enhances the value of the Quad. We have been able to engage together with some other countries in this region in furtherance of a shared agenda.
All of us want a world in which disputes are managed by rules, by talking, by cooperation, not by force or raw power. But most importantly, we understand that this does not happen on its own. We have to make this happen.
These are the first foreign ministerial talks within the group since September last year. Also among issues discussed are the Israel-Hamas conflict, North Korea and cybersecurity. The Quad gathering comes a day after high-level discussions in Tokyo between the US and Japanese defense and foreign ministers. They describe China as the greatest strategic challenge in the Indo-Pacific region and beyond. They also sealed agreements to boost military collaboration. CNA's Michio Ishida with more on the significance of that Quad meeting and why the top diplomats did not particularly name China in their talks.
Chair Yoko Kamikawa mentioned the foreign ministers agreed to lay out the specifics for a maritime order, and they will assess the current situation, expand capacity building, and dialogue to promote international order. Now, basically, the Quad aims to expand dialogue with the entire Indo-Pacific. It's at the back of attempts to unilaterally change the status quo in the South China Sea and East China Sea. They did not name a particular country involved in this attempt in their statement. They did condemn Russia for its invasion of Ukraine and North Korea for destabilizing the region for launching ballistic missiles, but they did not name China. Now, they mentioned the assistance they are providing to nations in the Indo-Pacific. Papua New Guinea from a landslide disaster, improving cybersecurity in the Philippines, and technological support for Palau and Mauritius. And for some of these nations, ties with China is crucial. So perhaps this is one of the reasons why they did not name China. They mentioned developing undersea cable, crucial for 95% of digital traffic. And Mr. Blinken, the U.S. Secretary of State, noted Quad together has a population of 2 billion, worth 35 trillion U.S. dollars, 30% of global stock investment, and that they will work to benefit all people in the region.
Well, let's get more insight, and we're joined by Associate Professor Kate Koga from the School of Social Sciences at Nanyang Technological University. Professor Koga, let's start first. I wonder whether you heard the opening remarks, because some critics are saying the Quad perhaps losing steam. For one, it's been hard to meet at the leaders' level, so we're seeing the foreign ministers come together. And even in those opening comments, India's External Affairs Minister made a point to state that the group was not a talk shop. Makes me want to ask, is it a talk shop?
Yeah, thank you for having me first. I think the objective of Quad remains the same. It aims to maintain and enhance the free and open rules-based international order in the Pacific and beyond. And at the beginning, the people actually considered that the Quad could be the security organization or security institutions that can actually enhance the military cooperation between the four countries. But like it turns out that the Quad actually provides more of the public goods related to the important issues, including the climate change, critical and emerging technology, cybersecurity, global health, etc., etc. So the role of the Quad is not now quite functional, not necessarily focused on the kind of strategic the deterrence against the China. Also, so it aims to facilitate regional cooperation among the member states.
Well, I take your definition and role of the Quad, but you have to admit that aside from India, the Quad members do have a really difficult bilateral relation with China, for example, and India has not openly rejected Russia's invasion of Ukraine. It sounds like there perhaps might be some internal unifying issues that the Quad has to handle to be effective.
Yes, definitely. There is a certain kind of the coordination and also the different strategic perspective between the member states. But they at the same time they could actually share certain kind of the strategic perspective on the Indo-Pacific. Right, so China is particularly the concern for the all of states. Even though like the degree is maybe a little bit different. So in that sense, I think what they could do is they try to kind of find out a common ground between the Quad member states, and then that actually fell into the functional cooperation, so that the Quad has the many the working groups and also the functional cooperation agendas on the table.
All right, let's talk about the meeting itself. The U.S. and Japan yesterday at the foreign ministers' meeting singled out China as the greatest strategic challenge in the Indo-Pacific region, even beyond. How did the Quad address security in the Indo-Pacific specifically?
So basically Japan and the United States have the really similar and pretty much kind of same perspective on China. So if you take a look at the joint statement that the foreign ministers actually produced, and foreign ministers and defense ministers produced the other day, then they actually mentioned that China is challenging the current existing international order that Japan and the United States supported. The thing is that the Quad and then the Japan and the US, the cooperation are completely different. The Quad has the 4 member states, and then on the other hand, Japan and the United States have long history cooperating with each other in terms of the defense, politics, and also the diplomacy, economics, etc., etc. So basically, there's particular differences between the Japan-U.S. cooperation and also the Quad cooperation. And then Quad cooperation could actually supplement Japan, U.S. the cooperation.
Absolutely. So, you mentioned the long history between the U.S. and Japan. I really want to drill down to specifics there because the U.S. announced it's revamping its military command in Japan from just a sort of administrative headquarters to an operational one. I'm wondering how far this upgrade will go to helping the U.S. and Japan have a more practical, a more effective strategy and defense relationship.
I think the current strategy of coordination that the Japan and the United States trying to enhance is really significant. Again, like if you take a look at the joint statement they created, it says at first Japan is already decided. Japan decided to establish the JSDF, Japanese Self-Defense Force Joint Operations Command, the so-called the JJOC, that actually coordinate all the military planning and also the policy planning together, and then they could actually have the more kind of effectiveness of the joint cooperation among the agencies in Japan. On the other hand, the United States actually didn't really have that kind of the system in Japan. So now like they are trying to create the U.S. forces in Japan as the joint force headquarters so that it could be the counterpart to the Japanese, the JJOC.
Were you also interested in the Japan and U.S., what's being called as the extended deterrence, which could involve U.S. using its own nuclear weapons to defend Japan? I mean, comment on that, if you will, because it is a shift on Japan's pacifist policy. And what does Japan need to give in return?
I think the both are interested in the maintaining the peace and stability in the Pacific, and then the nuclear weapon itself will not actually the offensive weapon that I think the United States and Japan consider, and it's more kind of defensive position, weapons to deter any kind of strategic instability they could actually face. So in that sense, what they need to do is not actually having the nuclear weapons in Japan or landing the nuclear weapons or developing the nuclear weapons in Japan, but they are trying to coordinate more the nuclear policies together so that they could actually prepare for strengthening the nuclear extended deterrence to Japan.
All right, we'll have to leave it there, but appreciate your thoughts. Our thanks to Associate Professor Kate Koga from the School of Social Sciences at Nanyang Technological University. Coming up on East Asia tonight, Italy's leader Giorgia Meloni meets Chinese President Xi Jinping in Beijing to relaunch cooperation with China. Toyota set to face more coordinated competition in its home market, Japan, as Mitsubishi Motors joins forces with Honda and Nissan. Chinese leader Xi Jinping has called for unity in talks with Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni, warning against division and protectionism.
双方旗鼓见今，共谋发展面临重要的机遇。当前世界百年变局加速演进，各国相通则互进、共进， 封闭则各退，团结则共进，分裂则各退。
This is the Italian Prime Minister's first trip to Beijing since she took office in 2022. Ms. Meloni also met Chinese Premier Li Qiang, signing a joint action plan on Sunday to smooth out the two countries' business relationship. According to the action plan, this means companies are to work on equal terms in the spirit of fair competition and free trade. Italy pulled out of China's Belt and Road Initiative late last year, Ms. Meloni describing it back then as a mistake. Straight to Giles Gibson, who joins us live from Rome. Giles, first, walk us through the Italian Prime Minister's packed schedule since she's landed in Beijing over the weekend.
Yeah, it's been a very busy schedule for the Italian Prime Minister, really building up to this meeting with Xi Jinping, the Chinese president, really the culmination of this multi-day trip to China. On Sunday, as you mentioned, we saw Giorgia Meloni meeting with the Chinese Premier Li Qiang, where she signed this 3-year action plan, also known as a memorandum on industrial cooperation between Italy and China. Meloni saying that this agreement is really focused on working together on electric mobility, so read sort of electric vehicles for that, as well as renewable energy, so helping Italy to expand, for example, its solar and its wind sector. The Chinese side were focusing on some slightly different sectors. They said that this agreement had more to do with shipbuilding and artificial intelligence and several other areas. And we also saw Giorgia Meloni addressing what was called the Italy-China Business Forum. So the Italian Prime Minister bringing with her representatives from Italian industry, companies such as the tyre manufacturer Pirelli, Dolce & Gabbana, one of the most important brands in terms of Italy's luxury sector, as well as Leonardo, which is a very big defence manufacturer here in Italy.
Giles, Italy's pullout from the Belt and Road Initiative last year, how big a diplomatic dent was that?
Yeah, we spent much of 2023 really waiting for the moment when Italy was going to announce that it was withdrawing from the Belt and Road Initiative. It had been part of the BRI, really Xi Jinping's signature policy in terms of foreign policy anyway. Italy had been part of that since 2019 when former Prime Minister Giuseppe Conte signed this deal, which made Italy the only G7 nation to become part of the BRI. What we saw really when Italy made that announcement was this attempt to really manage the fallout from it, to make sure that they were sending this message out to the world, that this wasn't kind of a complete break between Italy and China. And I think that's what we are seeing on this visit by Giorgia Meloni, this attempt to paint this really as a new phase, that they can still cooperate on industrial and trade policy without Italy being part of the BRI.
Right. Now, China's overall ties with the EU are on shaky grounds in recent times. Significant that Italy is one of the first to reach out since the EU tariffs on Chinese electric cars?
She is one of the first. We've also seen in recent months Olaf Scholz, the German Chancellor, travelling to China, and they have a similar position really to the Italians, that yes, they support some of this tough trade action that we've seen from the European Union, pushing back against what the EU describes as unfair state subsidies in sectors such as the electric vehicle market, as well as solar panels, for example, but also at the same time trying to maintain these trade ties that exist between some of these countries in Europe. So, of course, for Italy, that means luxury companies, car companies, and for Germany, it's along a similar vein in terms of Germany really trying to keep up its very large car brands and their presence inside the Chinese market.
Yet, Giles, Meloni is not expected to shy away from addressing some tough topics with China, like its overcapacity and its support for Russia and the war with Ukraine. It's quite a fine line to walk there.
Yeah, those were the issues that we were expecting Giorgia Meloni to raise specifically with Chinese President Xi Jinping in this meeting, pushing back against what the EU, as well as actually the G7, have described as these effects of Chinese overcapacity. So this argument that state subsidies, that Chinese overcapacity in terms of the domestic market is having a big impact on economies in the West, such as Italy and Germany, as well as the United States. And we were also expecting Giorgia Meloni to press Xi Jinping on this argument that even though China is not actually selling munitions, is not selling weapons to Russia as the war in Ukraine rages on, that it is still helping Russia's war effort by maintaining or even expanding economic ties between China and Russia.
Appreciate you keeping an eye on Giorgia Meloni's trip to China. Giles Gibson there. He's reporting live from Rome. Well, let's give you your business update next. East Asian equities, excluding China, are off to a strong start to the week, with rate decisions and corporate earnings filling investors' calendars to the brim. South Korean shares rising more than 1%, led by auto and financial stocks. Taiwan's TAIEX ending with a small gain. But it's the Japanese markets that are leading the charge ahead of the Bank of Japan's policy review later this week. The Nikkei 225 snapping an eight-session losing streak, up about 2.5% there. The broader topics also surging more than 2%. The yen now struggling to find its footing against the dollar after gaining momentum last week. Japan's government is considering a landmark bill that could guarantee loans for the state-backed chip startup Rapidus. Now, that's the latest effort to boost its semiconductor industry as it tries to lure private investors. A senior official of the Liberal Democratic Party of Japan, Yoshihiro Seki, says the bill is, quote, extremely exceptional. It seeks to reduce Rapidus's reliance on government funding. Mr. Seki acknowledged that it was not normal for authorities to invest in advanced semiconductors, but said the move is justifiable on economic grounds. The Tokyo-based chipmaker will need up to $25 billion in funding before it can start mass production at its plant in Hokkaido by 2027. The Japanese government has committed around $6.5 million to Rapidus. Prime Minister Fumio Kishida, who visited the site last week, vowed to expedite the mass production of what he called the next generation semiconductors. Now, the bill will be presented to the Diet as early as September. Some critics question Rapidus's competitiveness, as it will be 2 years behind in making the cutting-edge 2-nanometer chips. But Mr. Seki says Rapidus can still succeed, partly because chip demand from AI applications will surpass the production capacity of current players. Historically, Japanese law forbids the government from guaranteeing loans for specific companies, but it makes exceptions in cases where the funding would benefit the public. Mitsubishi Motors is set to join the Honda-Nissan alliance. According to a Nikkei report, the move will consolidate Japan's auto market, the world's third biggest, into two. Now, the Toyota Motor Group and the Honda-Nissan Mitsubishi tie-up. Back in March, Honda Motor and Nissan announced a comprehensive cooperation agreement that did not mention any decision on Mitsubishi, in which Nissan owns a 34% stake. Honda and Nissan are Japan's second and third largest automakers, respectively. Their sales, when combined with Mitsubishi's, will come up to 8.35 million vehicles. Still, that number is far behind the combined sales of 16 million wrapped up by Toyota's alliance with 5 other car makers. Mitsubishi will work with Honda and Nissan to finalize specific details of the alliance. Behind the alliance is a sense of crisis over a pivotal shift in the auto industry. Japanese automakers are lagging behind rivals such as Tesla and BYD as consumers shift to electric vehicles. In China, Nissan and Honda had to reverse their expansion plan as they struggled against cheap EVs produced locally. Chinese equities continue to struggle for momentum as investors wait for more signs of a sustainable economic revival. Shares in Shanghai are largely flat, while the Shenzhen component trailed in the red. Separately, China will stop publishing the daily data of overseas fund flows from the 18th of August. Another step by the country to obscure information about fund flows in and out of its lackluster stock markets. Completely different picture in Hong Kong. Shares of Alibaba jumping more than 5% at one point, the most in 2 months. They closed 4.7% higher. And that's after the tech giant announced it will start charging a service fee of 0.6% on confirmed transactions for vendors on its Tmall and Taobao platforms. This is expected to boost Alibaba's core merchant revenue. Alibaba's gains, together with those in other tech countries, helping hoist the benchmark Hang Seng into the green. Well, earlier, Daryl Liu of Sing Alliance says Chinese authorities should also look at other forms of policy support aside from rate cuts.
I think that's the million-dollar question, because post-Third Plenum, there hasn't really been very much concrete action in terms of new policy measures. The only thing really that we've seen are the rate cut side, but they have been pretty moderate, because you're talking about, first of all, 10 basis points cut, then another 25 basis points, right? So the big question here is whether or not there'll be more targeted measures. I mean, what you mentioned in terms of the industrial production numbers, that's something that we've seen over the last few months already, that the export sector has been relatively strong. But that's been pretty much driven by a global inventory restocking cycle, because we've seen similarly strong numbers coming out from Taiwan and Korea. But the key issue with China is obviously what you're going to do in terms of the property sector, and also how do you kind of create jobs and kind of boost consumption, because retail spending has been pretty sluggish. Still talking about moderate growth there, but something like 2-3% kind of growth, which is not really moving the needle that much. So I think more measures have to be done to tackle the property side, as well as kind of boost domestic consumption.
Coming up on East Asia tonight, a Senate hearing continues over a suspended mayor in the Philippines with alleged links to China and offshore gaming operators. China takes aim at the Quad, calling the security alliance between Australia, India, Japan and the US detrimental to regional trust. Chinese leader Xi Jinping has called for unity in talks with Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni, warning against division and protectionism. And major flooding in North Korea, forcing nearly 5,000 people from their homes. Leader Kim Jong-un is expected to declare multiple emergency disaster zones. Philippine lawmakers are putting further scrutiny on offshore gaming operators in the country, known as POGOs. The sector, which is taxed by Manila, is set to wind down by the end of the year. Now, this follows an immediate ban on these online casinos announced just last week by President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. He accused them of venturing into organized crime, including financial scams, human trafficking, torture, and even murder. In an address, Mr. Marcos said that the grave abuse and disrespect to Philippines' system of laws must stop. This comes amid controversy linked to the industry and potential regulatory failures that could have led to such issues. Many of the online casinos are run by Chinese operators and serve customers in mainland China where gambling is illegal. And in a related case that has captured the public's attention for weeks, concerns Alice Guo, the suspended town mayor of Bamban in Tarlac province, north of Manila. She faces multiple allegations, such as having links to a large online gambling complex near her town hall. And she's also being accused of fraudulently hiding her Chinese nationality to run for public office. Her financial assets have been ordered frozen, but the mayor denies any wrongdoing. Philippine senators have since issued an arrest order against her for repeatedly failing to participate in investigations. Well, let's get more from Buena Bernal. She joins us live. Buena, remind us first, a very complicated case about the political significance of these POGOs and the latest coming out from the hearing.
Well, that Senate hearing jointly by the Committee on Women, Committee on Public Order and Dangerous Drugs, as well as Committee on Migrant Workers was really an investigation in aid of legislation over the cases of human trafficking uncovered by law enforcement agencies in the northern Philippine hubs of these Philippine offshore gaming operators. And in that hearing, lawyer Harry Roque, who was the presidential spokesperson for former President Rodrigo Duterte, appeared as his name was implicated for having owned a house where supposed associates linked to crime-ridden POGOs were living and were raided. But Mr. Roque said that he simply had a nominal interest in the corporation that owned that house and that there was a duly notarized lease of contract between the corporation and these supposed associates. He also denied being the legal counsel of crime-ridden POGOs or any other POGO for that matter. And he also said that he has done his due diligence by ensuring that no commercial activity was done in that residential property he is linked to. But in the heat of that discussion, of course, Mr. Roque being aligned or known to be aligned with former President Duterte, and the presiding Senator Risa Ontiveros being aligned to the opposition, expressing her opposition against POGOs even during the Duterte administration, her colleague Senator Sherwin Gatchalian threatened to cite Mr. Roque in contempt because of supposedly talking over Senator Ontiveros during that hearing.
Will be compelled to cite you in contempt.
I understand and I apologize.
Kung naman sabayan siya, nagsasalita siya, siya ang chairperson.
Now, another former government official, Mr. Dennis Cunanan. Yes, Jill.
Please carry on.
Yeah, so there was another government or former government official who was present in that hearing as well. And he admitted, Mr. Dennis Cunanan, to having run a consultancy firm that secured a license from state firm Philippine Amusement and Gaming Corporation for the license of these crime-ridden POGOs. And Mr. Cunanan has actually been previously convicted by the Philippines Anti-Graft Court Sandigan Bayan for another government scam uncovered over a decade ago that siphoned lawmakers' discretionary funds to fake non-government organizations. And of course, all this is to show that there are prominent Philippine personalities, some of them government officials or former government officials, who are being linked to these POGOs. Of course, during that hearing, they distanced themselves from these crime-ridden POGOs and their operations. But the political significance of that is, of course, that the former President Rodrigo Duterte has been viewed as being friendly towards Chinese businesses, including POGOs.
Hard to believe, but it gets even more complicated, doesn't it? With the Bamban Mayor Alice Guo playing a bigger role in this as well, given the mounting controversy surrounding her case.
Well, there are, of course, speculations of Chinese malign influence operations related to this. But as of now, there has been no concrete evidence of this yet. What is for sure is that the suspended mayor is already being investigated by the Justice Department for those alleged links to the human trafficking operations in the POGO hubs in that town, Bamban, in northern Philippines. Likewise, that arrest warrant, of course, is because of her failure to appear before this Senate hearing where there was a summons for her to appear. Now, during Monday's hearing, the National Bureau of Investigation did say that there were sightings of the suspended mayor in Bulacan province, also north of Manila, but they have yet to determine her whereabouts. Senator Jinggoy Estrada also threatening to cut down the budget of the Philippine National Police and the National Bureau of Investigation if they're unable to track the suspended mayor. The Philippines Bureau of Immigration also confirming that based on their records, the suspended mayor is still in the Philippines.
Now, President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. taking a firm stance against the industry in contrast with Duterte's approach. Why is that?
That's right. In his third State of the Nation address, he announced that ban on POGOs. Of course, there is a rift between Mr. Marcos Jr. and the Dutertes, that being the former president, Rodrigo Duterte, as well as the vice president, his daughter, Vice President Sara Duterte. And beyond that, of course, in the issue of POGOs alone, that ban is already veering away from this friendly policy of Mr. Duterte towards Chinese businesses. And if you look at that State of the Nation address actually delivered last week by President Marcos Jr., the part of him announcing his ban on POGOs was the part that was met with a chanting of the initials of his name inside that congressional hall. And that's understandable because there was already a clamor from the public to ban POGOs. 298 of POGOs were actually registered as legal under Mr. Duterte's administration, and only 44 licenses are currently in place under the administration of Mr. Marcos Jr. Of course, there already has been that winding down of operations, but with this ban, the Philippine Amusement Gaming and Gaming Corporation, which is in charge of these licenses, are already talking to the Department of Labor as to how they can potentially provide assistance to the displaced workers of these POGOs. Some 20,000 Filipinos are supposedly being employed by POGO operations. Now, Senator Grace Poe has urged government to take advantage of the assets of these POGOs that they are leaving behind.
Just like to make sure, bawal na yung mga licenses for that. Kung ano pa man ang pangalan nila. Number two, ang daming mga infrastructure ng POGOs. Illegal infrastructures, because we found those that are not really registered. Maybe the government can decide what we can do with that. Baka mamaya housing na yan para sa ating mga kababayan.
Senator Risa Ontiveros also urged government to take advantage of a statutory provision that allows the government to seize assets from which survivor victims of human trafficking have been rescued from. And according to a Pulse Asia survey late last year, 83% of Filipino respondents actually do not favor POGOs, citing reasons such as proliferation of crimes, vices, proliferation of Chinese nationals employed in the Philippines, and even the hike in real estate prices because of the saturation of POGOs into the commercial properties in Metro Manila and surrounding provinces. A more recent survey, this time by research firm Octa Research, also says that 83% of Filipino respondents actually favor a nationwide ban on POGOs.
I appreciate it. CNA's Buena Bernal live from Metro Manila. China is reportedly exerting pressure on lawmakers from at least 6 countries not to attend a summit in Taiwan. The report by AP News Agency, citing the event's organizer and interviews with participants, says Chinese diplomatic officials reached out to the foreign politicians with texts, calls and urgent requests for meetings that will conflict with plans to travel to Taipei for the China-focused summit on Tuesday. The organizer, Interparliamentary Alliance on China, calls Beijing's move unprecedented.
People who are representing the People's Republic of China have got into contact with various MPs who are due to be here in Taipei at the IPAC summit, putting them under very heavy pressure not to attend. So just to be clear, they have been sending text messages, they have been bombarding, harassing MPs with phone calls to try to get urgent meetings in order to tell them that they should stay away, that they should not come to Taipei.
They contacted president of my political party. They asked him to stop me to travel to Taiwan, and he sent a message to them that he cannot stop me. I'm free member of parliament to make decisions.
Me dijo de manera directa que no debería venir a Taiwán, que era un tema muy grave para la embajada china el que yo asistiera a un encuentro con una organización internacional que no es aceptada dentro de los términos de la política de China continental.
Coming up on East Asia tonight, a blistering heat wave scorching Japan with temperatures hitting as high as 40 degrees Celsius.
11th August.
Major flooding has hit the northwestern part of North Korea along the Chinese border. State media says nearly 5,000 people are affected. Torrential rains poured down on the country over the weekend. North Korea's military reportedly dispatched about 10 helicopters and several Navy lifeboats to rescue thousands of flood victims within half a day. The country's leader, Kim Jong-un, visited the flooded areas and reportedly personally guided one military rescue. Mr. Kim had praised the army's rescue efforts, but also reportedly rebuked officials for insufficient preparation of crisis response measures to prevent damage caused by heavy rain, floods and typhoons. State media KCNA says he is expected to declare multiple emergency disaster zones as the extent of the damage unfolds. The remnants of Typhoon Gaemi continue to affect multiple provinces in China. While the storm has largely weakened, heavy rainfall has caused floods across the country. The Yalu River along China's border with North Korea flooded on Saturday, impacting the border city of Dandong. Over 10,000 people were evacuated. A landslide in central province of Hunan, also caused by the extreme weather, left at least 15 dead after it destroyed part of a residential house in Yuelin's village. A part of the province was also flooded after heavy rains caused a dike breach, forcing over 3,000 people to evacuate. Over 1,000 rescue personnel were deployed to aid residents and seal the breach, which authorities say had widened to 77 meters by Monday morning. So far, no casualties have been reported. Gaemi cut a deadly path through the Philippines and Taiwan last week. In the Philippines, it skirted the country's northeast, but with devastating effect, claiming 34 lives. In Taiwan, Gaemi left 10 people dead after hitting the island's northeast regions. Over to Japan. Intense heat is engulfing parts of the country. The mercury topped 40 degrees Celsius in Shizuoka Prefecture this morning. Heat stroke alerts have been issued in several prefectures in the central region, including the capital, Tokyo. Temperatures have already topped 38 degrees Celsius in some parts and is expected to hit highs of about 40 degrees today. Local weather officials have attributed the heat to a high-pressure system that has been driving up temperatures. Residents have been advised to protect themselves against the heat, and that includes avoiding outings as much as possible and staying in cool indoor spaces. Well, the UN High Commissioner for Refugees is hoping the presence of a refugee Olympic team would help raise awareness on displacement. The team has 37 athletes competing in 12 different sports.
Every story is different, that are not or not yet citizens of other countries, that cannot go back or cannot yet go back. So they are in that difficult situation. They are often marginalized, excluded, stigmatized by some politicians in particular. So this is a powerful message back. Although, should they spend their youth in this limbo? No. Let's give them a chance as well. Of course, this is only 37 people, and there are 120 million refugees in the world, but it's powerful as a symbol, as a positive message in so many different ways.
Well, the Paris Games is only the third Olympics to host the refugee team. Members from 11 countries will be participating in a wide variety of sports, from badminton to athletics to boxing. The team first competed in the Rio Games in 2016. Their attendance draws attention to record displacements all across the world, as well as the rise of far-right leaders calling for tougher positions on migrants and asylum seekers.
It's difficult. If you look to the any sport, it's difficult. If you are a refugee, if you're not a refugee, it's difficult from basic is difficult. But if you are a refugee, you learn that you be tough to survive, and that make you training more harder. And when you give the chance, you are taking it.
Well, the Summer Olympics has sparked enthusiasm even beyond Earth's atmosphere. NASA astronauts aboard the International Space Station have been getting into the spirit of the Games. They organized their own mini Olympics, taking part in sports that were literally out of this world, from weightlifting to shot put and gymnastics, held in zero-gravity conditions. Despite the playful nature of their games, the astronauts concluded their activities with a message to athletes.
We, of course, have had the benefit of weightlessness. We can't imagine how hard this must be to be such a world-class athlete doing your sports under actual gravity. So from all of us aboard the International Space Station to every single athlete in the Olympic Games, Godspeed!
Well, that is East Asia Tonight for this Monday. Singapore viewers, do stay tuned for highlights from the Paris 2024 Olympics. And don't forget headlines anytime at cna.asia. We're also on Facebook, YouTube, and X.
Hello, I'm Paul Singh with your Olympic update on day 3 of competition, and we begin with the women's 10-meter air rifle at the Charleroi Shooting Centre. A nail-biting moment as the crowd reacts to a shoot-off between South Korea's Ban Hyo-jin and China's Huang Yuting. Both finalists tallied a score of 251.8, equaling the Olympic record set in Tokyo 2020. But the South Korean sharpshooter, who's only 16, prevailed, winning by a margin of just 0.1 point. 17-year-old Huang bagging the silver this time round after her gold in the mixed event over the weekend. Switzerland's André Galquinet wins bronze with a score of 230.3. Reigning world champions Lian Zhujie and Yang Hao have claimed the men's synchronized 10-meter platform diving title. The Chinese duo had almost perfect dives in their Olympic debut, finishing with a top score for all 6 rounds to tally a massive total of 490.35 points. Despite a show-stopping final dive, Great Britain's Tom Daley failed to defend his Tokyo title as he finished second alongside partner Noah Williams. Canadian duo Rylan Weems and Nathan Zomba-Murray won their country's first Olympic medal in the event with bronze. In badminton, the first game of the day delivered the most shocking result.
It's into the nets from Wang Dongping.
Malaysian mixed pair of Chen Tangjie and Toh Yiwei beat second seeds Feng Yanzhi and Huang Dongping of China. The duo delivered a smooth 17-21, 21-15, 21-16 performance to claim the top spot in Group D. With an undefeated run in the preliminary stage, Olympic newcomers Tang Jie and Yi Wei will enter the quarterfinals with a chance finish on the podium. In other badminton matches today, Britain's Kirsty Gilmer defeated Azerbaijan Keisha Fatima Azara, and China's mixed pair of Chen Shiwei and Huang Ya-cheong beat South Korea's Kim Won-ho and Jung Eun-na, maintaining their unbeaten top spot in Group A. In volleyball, Turkey has beaten the Netherlands 3-2. Turkey struggled in the first 2 sets against the Netherlands and only got in the groove in the third set. The Sultans of the Net equalized in the fourth set to take the game into 5, with Melissa Vardas delivering the crucial 15th instant death point. Turkey will now go on to play against Dominican Republic and the Netherlands against Italy. In South Paris Arena, Germany beset Best's Japan in the first handball game of the day. The three-time Olympic medalist Germany took a commanding 21-10 lead at half-time, with youngster Rinas Ulshins and playmaker Yuri Noh leading the charge. The second half saw Japan fighting back to score 16 goals, but that was not enough to overcome the Germans, who pulled ahead to claim a 37-26 win. Germany will go against Croatia on Wednesday. This is how the medal tally is looking so far. China leads the medal count again with 5 out of its 9 medals shining gold. South Korea and Japan share the second slot with 4 gold medals. Australia is just below them by the difference of a single bronze medal. Although the United States has the most number of medals, the silverware isn't golden enough to push the country up the ranks. It gets the 5th slot. And that's the latest from the Olympic desk. And don't forget, there's non-stop action live and on demand for free with MediaCorp on MeWatch.